No. Actually, it was something
Oh, I
that
see what you're saying now.
I could probably use this, but it's a 4 weeks
Oh.
of material.
I turned your microphone off because it was getting feedback.
Oh, good, thank you.
So,
Just
Figure that out.
yeah, so I think,
Right. Correct. You do have to put the microphone really close.
a lot of people by,
Or something.
Something there.
I think,
Did you call Tina this one?
Not yet. I did take the thing down. I presume it's an answer.
It is. I did it, and it doesn't take long.
Okay.
good morning. I think I'll only get started because I want to respect the time and make sure Jane has enough time to speak today. Hopefully, anyone who's stuck upstairs in line will be coming down.
Yeah, great. They're also calling Tina Liebling this
Oh,
morning
Okay,
to support a House bill on the
Oh.
Minnesota care option.
okay.
So people are at the table
Right.
calling her and leaving a message for her to support that bill.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. We got lots of good things going on today at CUMC. So I want to welcome everyone, especially you joining us at home to the CUMC Third Sunday Forum. As I was getting ready this morning, I always look at the post bulletin online and noticed there was a article this morning about immigration in Southeast Minnesota. And it included the statistic that Olmsted County hosts the largest number of foreign-born residents in Southeast Minnesota, comprising 11.2% of its total population, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. And I think that's a really timely article today. Check out in the post bulletin, as we also welcome Jane Grieling, who's here today to talk to us about her work at Annunciation House and working with asylum seekers and welcoming people to the United States. So thank you so much, Jane.
You're welcome. Thank you, Karen. This is good?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm honored to be invited by your church because you've been good advocates of immigration, and I've noticed that. And I'm honored to be able to talk to you about my story. I'm going to tell you about my volunteer work at Annunciation House in El Paso, Texas. I've been volunteering there intermittently for the last 7 years. So, and I can only tell you about El Paso. I can't tell you about all the other cities along the border where people are helping. There are communities welcoming asylum seekers in California, Nevada, and all along the Rio Grande in Texas. So I only know about El Paso, but I think the general welcoming spirit is there all along the border. As we know, immigration policy is a problem, but the immigrants themselves are not the problem. And that's not my quote, it's a quote of the Bishop of Miami. So I'm going to talk to you about the people I've met while I've been volunteering at Annunciation House. And first I would like to show you this. This is a picture of the city. Well, it's the sun rising over Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. And this is Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, and El Paso. They're separated only by this little ribbon, as you can see, of the Rio Grande. And so it's a city where people have for centuries mingled back and forth. Their families still go back and forth on weekends, and people every day drive back and forth between El Paso and Ciudad Juarez to work. And so it's a welcoming city, it's a bicultural city, and it's a city where they have been opening their arms to asylum seekers, especially since 2013, 2014. I cannot believe that they haven't tired of it, but they have more than 20 churches that are just at the ready. When they know there's going to be a big influx of people, they've got their beds ready, they've got their food group ready, they've got their volunteers ready to just step up and help. So that is the city of El Paso. The city also has border walls, and I'll show a few pictures of them. This is the border walls. This is the border along the Rio Grande in El Paso. And this is farther along the river. farther along the river, the latest, barriers that they have placed along the border. I don't think that bigger. So I think you can see them okay. And this is in San Diego. They made the walls taller and harder to get across. Let me try to make this bigger. So it says when you have more than you need, build a larger table, not a taller wall. So I want to tell you about a person I met, and it's a story that involves the wall. It's about Arturo. He is he's in his mid-20s, and he came to our shelter and stayed for 2 weeks. He was not seeking asylum. He was at our shelter because he was a guest of the Mexican consulate. And they asked if he could stay with us because he needed to visit his mother, who was in the hospital in El Paso. And what happened with his mother is she was 42 years old, trying to support her family in Mexico and just could not make ends meet. And what happens with so many of these people who come to the United States, she was approached by a human smuggler, a coyote, who promised her that things were so much better in the United States. And if she would pay him to get her here, she could make life much better for her children. Well, the coyotes asked for $8,000 to begin with. And then along the way, they take whatever money the people have with them. And then they also begin to extort their families for more and more money. So it's a difficult journey and it's an expensive journey. And the coyotes get them to the border and they help them cross. Sometimes it's across the desert or the river. And with Arturo's mom, she needed to cross the wall. So what happens with the coyotes is they have a ladder on one side of the wall, but on the other side of the wall, there is no ladder. There's no way to get down. There are many falls from the wall. There are some deaths. One of the Annunciation houses has an area set aside where they have an infirmary. And in that infirmary, they're taking care of people with broken arms, broken backs, broken legs that have come, they're either between surgeries or they're getting better before they can move on. So what happened with Arturo's mom is she fell from the wall. She was in a coma in the hospital and on a breathing machine. And Arturo for 2 weeks would go visit her all day long. He would come back after supper, and while he had supper with us, he would tell us how his mom was doing. Some days better, some days a lot worse. And I just want to share with you my last view of Arturo. It's his back, and he's walking away from the shelter toward the border. Our shelter was only 4 blocks from the border. And he's walking home to cross and go back to Mexico, but he does not know if he will ever see his mother again. And I don't know the rest of her story either. So why do they come? This is one of those huge caravans that you read about and seen pictures of. Why do they come? They come because of, like Arturo's mother, they're poor, they want to make a better living. My belief and the belief of many people working with immigrants is that these human smugglers are one of the main drivers because they promise that things are going to be so much better. And no matter how many of our government officials go down and tell people to stay home, they believe in hope, and they believe these smugglers, and they believe that life will be better for them. So the poverty is driven by climate change because their crops are failing, they have hurricanes. It's driven by poor governments that either can't handle the cartels or don't want to handle the cartels, or governments that are corrupt themselves. They're coming, as you know, they're coming. I've seen people from Iran, Turkey, China, Russia, Ukraine, Africa. They're coming from all kinds of people who are oppressed everywhere. They're also coming because of sanctions. And in the last 2 years, the people, over 50% of the people crossing have been from Venezuela, where there are very heavy sanctions on the people. And also, there are life threats. People come and because their children have been threatened by the drug cartels. And I've talked to a number of people who have watched their family members be shot by the drug cartels. And they're running from the cartels because they witnessed the murder. And also they just, if they have businesses, cartels are extorting their businesses. So it's just, that's some of the things that are driving people to come. So how do they get here? How do they get across the border, or how do they get admitted? First of all, asylum is a human right, and anyone who steps foot on U.S. soil has the right to ask for asylum. So it used to be when things were quieter that people would just come to the border, the little border gate or border tower or a great big building, and they'd ask the Border Patrol to begin a process to let them in. And it was as simple as that. Well, then there began to become more and more people. And about 5 years ago, the Border Patrol would approach the people coming to the border, and the Border Patrol would take like 5 steps into Mexico. And they'd say, you cannot come into the US, you have to return to Mexico. It became known as the Remain in Mexico policy, and it was reinforced by the borders closing with COVID. And so then people were staying in the cities across, like Juarez had many people staying there, and they had many shelters there. Well, some attorneys would go to help the people in Juarez. There are a lot of attorneys in El Paso who for free will cross the border and interview people. And also there are people all over the United States. They would do it by phone or by internet, attorneys that would help these people get their papers. So that's another way that they were able to enter. The attorneys would do the filing, and then they would have the papers so they could enter. For about the last 6 months, there's a new way to enter. It applies to 4 countries, and they can apply by internet. They have to apply by internet to get in. And that program is going so-so. As you know, it's there are internet jams, and there's a lot of bureaucracy with filing. And the other way that they come is as what you're seeing on TV. They are entering illegally through a hole in the fence. They're crossing where there is no border fence. They're crossing in the desert. Or they are crossing by river. And I am going to enlarge that. Once they cross, they turn themselves into the Border Patrol, and they ask the Border Patrol for asylum. Now, some people do sneak through, and they are in the United States without legal papers. But most of the people that come are turning themselves into the Border Patrol to get the proper papers. And then the Border Patrol takes them in that white bus that you see, and they take them, some of them go to a detention center. Most single adults will go to a detention center, and they can be there for 1 month, 2 months, up to a year. You get out of the detention center either by somebody posting bail or by your attorney going through the courts and getting asylum. Or the most common way to get out of detention is by deportation. Most of the people in detention are deported at one time or another. But the other people, the Border Patrol takes them to a holding cell. The holding cell is a holding cell. It usually holds about 3 times more people than it's supposed to. The English translation for the word people use is icebox. So it's cold, it's got cement floors. They sleep on cement floors with these Mylar emergency blankets. And they get food. Usually when it's really busy, the Border Patrol feeds them by throwing into the room frozen burritos or small little juice boxes. And they do this twice a day. So they're in this holding cell for 24 to 72 hours. Nobody can be held more than 72 hours, especially no children. And so then, let me see. When it comes time for, I'm ahead of myself. Anyway, while they're in the holding cell, the Border Patrol is processing them. The Border Patrol does a background check. They do fingerprinting. They call a sponsor. Everybody who comes and is released has a sponsor or the name of a person where they will be going once they are released from the Border Patrol. If they don't have a sponsor in El Paso, they will use the name of one of our shelters, and then they stay at the shelter until we can find a place for them to go. So the Border Patrol calls these sponsors and they make sure that they will accept the people. And then they make a court date, and that court date will be the closest federal court to their destination. So all that is going on, and once the Border Patrol has all these papers in order, then they call the director of Annunciation House. Annunciation House is a group of shelters in El Paso that's been operating since 1976. It was started by a group of young people who wanted to do good. And one of the founders is still the director. His name is Ruben Garcia. You may see him on TV. He's quoted quite often. So Annunciation House consists of three permanent shelters. This one pictured is the first one. There's another one, and there's the third one. These three shelters in El Paso are operated only by donations. They've been offered federal money and they've refused it. They've started another shelter that's more long-term, and they are getting a federal grant for that. But otherwise, they are operating solely on donations. So the Border Patrol calls Ruben and he tells them how many people that are coming that day, how many people they're going to release. They sometimes release to the street. A year ago, they were releasing a lot to the street, but now the city of El Paso is even opening up their own shelters to keep people off the street. They take very good care of their asylum seekers. So once Ruben gets a list of these numbers, and some days it's like only 50 or 100 that are crossing at El Paso. Some days it's up to 1,000. So he coordinates these numbers, and he coordinates the churches and tells which churches need to open up and accept asylum seekers. There is also the city of Las Cruces in New Mexico, which is not far away. They have a huge volunteer group that takes in asylum seekers, and they bring their own bus. They run the bus by volunteers. Denver also, for a long time, has had volunteer shelters. And either the city of El Paso will run a bus, or Annunciation House would charter a bus that would take people to Denver. And this was before Governor Abbott started his busing program. Appreciate that humor. So the principal mission of Annunciation House is hospitality. So this is some of the sleeping accommodations. And of course, we feed them. So what happens when they come to the shelter? We welcome them. The first thing we tell people is, you are safe here. We do not belong to the government. And the look on their faces makes all of our hard work just worthwhile. And I can't express what relief that they show. And then we register them. They've been given a number by the Border Patrol, and we register their number, their name, we register where they're going, so we have documentation about them. And then we check their papers. We make sure that they have all the papers that they need to travel. And then we feed them because they're always hungry. And then we call their sponsors. And that's another beautiful moment when they're talking to long-lost relatives or friends, and they get the word that they will be able to stay in the United States for a while and travel on. The sponsors need to provide transportation. So they have to buy a plane ticket or a bus ticket or a train ticket, and then they call us back with a confirmation number. Then we send them on with food. Some bus trips are 3 to 4 days long. And so they have quite big bags of food there. So this is a volunteer working with one of the asylum seekers. And this is just some of the paperwork that they get from Homeland Security. It's called humanitarian parole. This is their picture ID and their fingerprinting, and there's the name of their sponsor. And this is their notice to appear in court. The notice, the date for court is usually about 30 days to the day of when they arrive in the United States. And this is just to show the many places where people come from. It's not just one border station. There are about 7 border stations all along the Rio Grande, around El Paso, and then there are other processing stations too. So there are about 10 or more places where they will, every day will call and have people to come from. This is just information we give about the bus and the airline. And this is to kind of show you what life is like in the shelter. After everybody settles in, they get a shower, which they welcome. They get a clean change of clothes. They can wash the clothing that they have. They wash it by hand, and it dries quickly in the desert air. And then we settle in. Usually people stay a day. We try to encourage them to move out rather quickly because there are always more people coming. But everybody works with cleaning up, cooking. They have to clean their own space when they leave. There's a lot of singing after dinner. And this is just to show you the grouping of people. The gentleman is from Russia. The woman is from Ukraine. The children are not playing with plastic bags. That's what their items come in. But it's a little girl from Central America and 2 little children from Haiti. So we have a lot of variety of people, and it's wonderful to see the children settle in too. At first, they're crying all the time. They just don't know what's happened to them, and they don't know what's going to happen. And pretty soon they play. We have lots of puzzles, and they like to play with puzzles. Oh, sorry. Can you see that well enough, or should I make it bigger? Is it okay? This young woman is named Nidia. I met her just this last October. She came from a Central American country, I can't remember which one. She left behind her 14-year-old son. She talks to him by FaceTime every night, and so I got to meet him. Nidia was hired a coyote to get her to the United States, and they crossed the border, and somebody shouted, "Run." And that's the last that Nidia can remember. She woke up in a hospital in El Paso, and she had been brutally raped. And then during her hospitalization, they discovered that her leg was not working, it was whatever. She needed her leg amputated. She had been bitten by a snake or some kind of bug or something while lying in the desert. So she came to the shelter where I was working, and when I met her, she had been there maybe 3 months. And she was getting lots of trauma care, lots of physical therapy. And this next picture is the day she arrived with her new prosthesis. If you can see that, and then I have a picture of her walking with her prosthesis. Oh, the joy. And I just heard from some of my volunteer friends that this month she will be going to stay with her sister, I think in Ohio. So that's a story of the resilience and the hope that these people have. And I have another story. The gentleman in the wheelchair, his name is William, and that volunteer is Ben. William's doing some exercises. William's story begins a year ago in March 2023, and his story was in the news. It was in the news what happened. These people are in Juarez, and in Juarez there were a lot of shelters set up because so many people were remaining there. There were Annunciation House had 2 shelters, churches had shelters. Anyway, this one shelter where William was a lot of young men, and they were beginning to they were all, rumoring that pretty soon their number was going to be called and they were going to be able to cross. And so they were getting lots of hope that soon they would be coming into the United States. Well, one day, a young man came running into the shelter and he said, "We're all being deported." And another young man lit his mattress on fire. Now, this shelter, for some reason, was guarded by Mexican security guards. The Mexican security guards locked the doors. 45 people died in the fire, and William was one of the 27 people who survived. So he was in the hospital, and about 4 months later, they called they called Annunciation House and asked if he could come live there. And it was just so happened that two of the volunteers there at the time were physical therapists. So William came to live there, I think, last July. And he's getting physical therapy as an outpatient, extensive physical therapy, and he's doing exercises every day, as you can see with this volunteer. And when I met him in October, when he arrived, he couldn't walk. He had no use of his arms or his legs. He had so much brain damage, and he could not speak. And when I saw him, he was feeding himself with special utensils, and he could walk about 20 steps with a walker, and he could talk. And his speech is really hard to understand, but he's a delightful person. He's got a sense of humor. He is good. He's good to all the children. He does what he can to make people feel happy, and he's just outgoing, and he's learning a little English. And so the reason I mention that is because I want it to be that we end with a little hope. These folks have hard things that happen to them, but they do have hope. I have, I think we have time for one more story. If we did. This is a story of my friend Clary Bell. That's her daughter Sunny. This is back in 2018 when they were reunited after children were separated from their parents. I helped Clary with a lot of paperwork for reunification, and she had also been in a bus accident on her way to the States, and so she and I spent a lot of time at the doctors, so we've kept in touch over the years. So this is 5 years ago, and after Clary was reunited with her daughter, she moved to Phoenix with her brother. He was deported, and then she moved to South Bend. And I was able to talk to a friend she met in South Bend. Marisol was her friend who spoke English, so I could get the story. Marisol was an immigrant herself, and she saw Clary walking down the street one day and thought, this woman needs some help. And so Clary reached out to help her. Marisol reached out to help Clary. And she got her linked up with a lot of people. And Clary had no teeth from the accident, and so she ended up getting some dentures. She still had headaches from a horrible skull fracture. Her stitches went from here to here. The surgeon said it was the worst skull fracture he had ever seen. Anyway, they helped her with pain with that. And now Clary is, her daughter Sunny is enjoying school, and Clary got her driver's license last year. So people enter, people are good to them. There's a lot of good in the world, and there is a lot of hope. And I just hope that I've painted a picture of the people who are crossing the border rather than the policies. And I'll take questions.
How long were you there?
How long was I there? One time I was there 10 months, but other times it's been like 2 months or 3 months.
The Annunciation now doesn't receive money from the federal government, and that's because of.
The question is, why does Annunciation House not take money from the federal government? I think it's because the director is stubborn. He doesn't want to be linked to any federal policies. And that's their policy, but they get enough donations that they do well.
Which organization was just sued by the Attorney General in Texas? Was it you guys?
Which organization was just sued by the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, in El Paso? It was Annunciation House. They showed up at the door, and a friend of one of my volunteer friends answered the door. Three lawyers said, show us all your papers. Annunciation House countersued and said, we need to know which papers you want. And it went back and forth. The outcome of that is that the judge, and in between, you seem to know the whole story.
I'm from Texas.
You're from Texas.
Ashamed to say that because of the way they treat.
You're free, okay, from Texas. The whole community stood up, the representative, Escobar, the mayor, the rabbi was there at a press conference, the bishop, everybody stood up for Annunciation House. This attorney general called Annunciation House a stash house. And he said that they were sneaking people illegally over the border, which is not true. The judge in the case said to the attorney general, this is politically motivated, you have no ground to stand on, and he sent it to a lower court. They still need to process something through the lower court, but the judge showed the attorney general. But Texas has also given a hard time to Catholic charities along the Rio Grande, and they've accused them of the same thing, of taking, and that's the reason they don't take government money, because they're accused of taking government money and then these things happen. Any other questions?
You mentioned that, within 30 days, they end up at a court. What's the purpose of them going to court? Is that illegal?
The question is, I'm going to court within 30 days. The court date is within 30 days. That is their first appearance in court. That just gets them started. It usually takes 4 or 5 years to even get an attorney or to be able to have a judge hear your case for a final anything. And they can't get work permits until, I can't remember when, but there's now a bill right now in the House of Representatives. Please look it up because I'm not real good on this. But so that when they first go to court, they can get work permits, and that will help all of us in the United States because
For it.
there's a need for
They need
workers.
it. We need the employees.
We
In
need the
Texas,
employees.
anyway.
So look it up. I
Just
just,
start pointing at me.
I still don't understand why do they have to go through that court system? Why?
It's the law.
the papers say that they are really not in the country legally. Although, they do have papers that they can be here.
Seems like a contradiction.
It is a contradiction, and the whole process takes so long is because they don't have enough attorneys, and they don't have enough judges to process it.
Looks like somebody put something in the chat. I don't know. Can you? pull up the
It's
chat?
me, there's no, I was telling them they can ask.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I unmuted people.
Kathleen?
Thank you.
We have a person who attends our church who came by visa and seeks asylum, but it's been 7 years and no decision yet.
So, the report is that there's someone in your church that, has been seeking asylum for 7 years and there's been no progress. And it's true.
Has been to court several times, and the judge said, don't contact me.
The judge said,
Has waited this long for a decision.
there's such backlog. So the general message should be that we really need to do something about the policy and, look up that work permit program.
So do you, when they come and seek asylum, do you set them up with a judge, with a lawyer, an immigration lawyer?
No, not at our shelter. When we tell them that the first thing they need to do is get a lawyer. And we give them, and in fact, the Border Patrol even gives them a list of agencies they can call where they're going to be going. But there's just so few lawyers, and it's just so hard. There's the language barrier.
It's expensive because as you wait these many years, you're still paying a lawyer.
Yes, the lawyers are expensive, and you might know better than I what they're costing, but it's quite expensive. Meanwhile, if they can work, it's wonderful. A man told me, this is a number of years ago, I said, well, why do you come? It's so hard. And he said, I know they're probably going to deport me, but if I can earn some money and send it home before that, it's all worth it. So I think that you hear that on the news too. People come, and I think economies of some of those countries depend on people working here and sending the money home. Any questions from chat?
I just want to say thank you all for what you did.
Thank you. I see, that was a thank you, and I thank you all for being able to tell the story and for being so sympathetic and listening.
Thank you.
I didn't realize it moved on.
You wanna talk about
That
the
man is
picture?
from Turkey. That man is from Turkey. And, he went downtown one day and he came back with some artificial roses to thank us.
Yes.